Son of God, Son of Man, Son of David, Teacher, Preacher, Rabbi, Lord, Healer, Physician, Magician, Miracle Man. These were some of the many titles that followed Jesus throughout the course of his ministry. And with each new title, whole sets of expectations sprouted and grew. With Jesus now ready for his arrival and ascent into Jerusalem, expectations were abounding. Everyone had hopes that Jesus should fulfill. Everyone had needs that the Messiah should meet. Now, while we here at Trinity did not have our traditional Palm Sunday parade, we were still able to catch a glimpse of the excitement that filled that original scene. What a beginning to the most momentous week in all of history. Chaos in the streets, dancing from the crowds, enemies coming together to conspire, disciples diverging in every which direction, everyone wondering what Jesus had in mind, what God had in mind, what Caiaphas had in mind, what Pilate and the Romans had in mind with the arrival of this great and glorious day called Palm Sunday. Now, Matthew's account underscores a simultaneity of many dueling moments, which display an ever-expanding list of contrasts that add pace and tension, surprise and disappointment to the climax of this gospel narrative. For example, Jesus gathers his disciples at the very same moment that the leaders of God's people had gathered to conspire against him. The woman kneels to bless Jesus with devotion precisely as Judas is heading off to the chief priests to turn devotion into betrayal. Jesus sits at table, breaking bread and creating an everlasting bond with his disciples at precisely the same time as Judas is identified as the one to betray him. With the same mouth, Peter boasts of his loyalty and denies any knowledge of the one he called his friend and Lord. On the one hand, Judas succeeds in setting Jesus' appointment with destiny in motion. But with the other hand, he ties a hangman's noose, conceding his irretrievable failure by taking his own life. When the day began, the crowds were cheering Jesus with waving arms and palm branches in their hands. But when it counted most, their cheers turned to jeers. Waving arms became wagging tongues, and their ringing hosannas became a chorus of a different sort. Crucify him! Crucify him! We want Barabbas! Let Jesus be crucified. The key to understanding these contrasts and turnabouts has everything to do with how these many hopes were running wild in just about every direction. The hopes that the crowds brought with them to this moment were undisciplined by the reality that God had chosen to give them in Jesus. Even Jesus' own followers, who as disciples should have been disciplined in the instructions of their Lord, even those who knew Jesus the longest and the best found themselves harboring hopes that were way wide of the mark. Peter seems to have had glory on his mind, both Jesus' glory and his own. But his hopes for glory would need to make room for the glory of sacrifice and the call to service. Judas seemed to think that it was all about timing, that all Jesus needed was a push in the right direction. But when he saw that the way to true life was routed through Golgotha, the unfathomable depth of his disappointment, both in Jesus and in himself, made him choose death over new life. It is so very important to know what Jesus is about, what our God is about, in making Jesus the one in whom we would see true love and find true life. That's what discipleship means. It means having our hopes disciplined by the fact that the cross was not a mistake. It wasn't merely an unanticipated detour. It is the form that God's love takes when sin abounds. It is the path Jesus chooses. It is the path Jesus chooses to show us the nature of God and the way to salvation. Golgotha is God's love and God's life fully revealed. The mood has now changed. The focus has shifted. What began as a day of hosannas ringing has now become a chorus of a very different sort. A story of wondrous love, revealed as suffering love, defined by sacrifice and service. There is a lot to consider as Palm Sunday turns to Jesus' passion and death. And we are invited to follow that journey with the twists and turns of Holy Week, moving through Maundy Thursday and Good Friday to the dawn that begins a new day, a new age, with the miracle of Easter. In the meantime, let's turn our attention to the hymn we've been singing by listening to verses 4, 5, and 6 of our hymn of the day. My song is Love Unknown.